Welcome again, friends, to Extraordinary Connection. I'm Pastor Scott, and I'm glad you're here. Today, I want to talk about the scientist Temple Grandin. Mary Temple Grandin was born to a very wealthy Boston family. Mary is her first name, but because there was a servant in the house named Mary, the family started calling her Temple to avoid confusion. At 2 years old, Mary was not developing cognitively like she should. Her mother took her into the doctor, and after a few scans, the doctor diagnosed Temple as brain damaged and said there's nothing more we can do, and the doctor recommended Temple be institutionalized, which was the treatment for any kind of neurological problems at the time. Temple's mother, though, didn't want to institutionalize her daughter, so because of their wealth, they kept Temple home, bouncing her from one specialist to another, one boarding school to another. And Temple was never quite fitting in right, never really connecting with her peers or teachers in any traditional sense. Then by chance, Temple's mom read an article that talked about the condition known as autism. Today we're quite familiar with the disease. 1 out of 59 children are diagnosed being somewhere on the autistic spectrum. But back when Temple was young, it was a relatively new diagnosis. An autistic brain processes the stimuli around them differently and often can't unnotice things in their environment. Ever walk into a room and smell cinnamon rolls cooking? It smells great, doesn't it? But eventually the brain blocks the smells and you don't notice it anymore, so that your brain can focus on the other things in your environment. For an autistic person, though, they can't stop noticing. Their brain won't stop processing those stimuli. So things like smells can be overpowering to an autistic mind, or sound. Oftentimes, autistic individuals will wear noise-canceling headphones to minimize the amount of noise stimulation they receive. Temple, though, she was sensitive to touch, and she found comfort in close spaces, but a hug by another person was difficult for her. When Temple was 18, she visited her aunt's ranch in Arizona. While there, Temple was watching the cattle and noticed that just like her, they became more soothed when they were in a close space. At the urgings of her teacher, she invented what's become known as a hug box or a squeeze machine, a device that helps calm cattle down before they are led to the butcher. And that was just the start for Temple. She went on to receive her PhD in animal science. She became one of the leading experts in the humane treatment of livestock for slaughter, and has also become the voice of the autistic community. Her candid sharing of her thoughts, her emotions, her sensations have given doctors great insight into autism and the way it impacts the brain. Autism is personal for me. Today, as I record this video, it is my grandson Corbin's 11th birthday, and Corbin is nonverbal autistic. Corbin wears his headphones all the time, and Corbin lives in our world but experiences it so differently than those around him. When Corbin was born, and when we first started noticing something different in his development, I would pray to God to heal Corbin. I didn't want Corbin to struggle in life. I wanted Corbin, in my words at the time, to be normal. Because at the time, I had a narrow definition of what normal was. I thought Corbin was disabled because he didn't think and respond to the world just like me. But I've come to realize, having watched Corbin, having read up on autism, having prayed and read a bit of disabled theology, Corbin is made perfect in the image of God. Too often, we get hung up on diseases like autism or blindness or cerebral palsy or multiple sclerosis or any one of the other of hundreds of conditions. And conditions we use with labels like birth defects. And we wish we were normal, or we wish our loved ones were normal. We look at Genesis 1, which says God made them, man and woman, in his image, and assume that only those who think like I do, or have a nervous system like I do, or can see like I do, was made in the image of God. we make the mistake thinking that God needs to heal them, those that are different from the norm, so that they're made well. Or if we've prayed long enough, we might reconcile the difference with the hopeful, well, when they get to heaven, then they'll be cured. What if, though, there's nothing to be cured? What if we narrow-mindedly view as an illness or condition or defect or whatever really isn't a problem, but it's a blessing? What if someone like Corbin and Temple are created in the image of God, just like we think we are? And what if God's image encompasses more than gender, more than race, more than age, but God's image also encompasses mobility difficulties and cognitive dissonance and sensory deprivation and immune suppression and the host of other things we ask God to fix, ask God to cure, but they don't need to be fixed or cured because they are perfect in the image of God? What if autism and the way Corbin and Temple and other autistics encounter the world is a blessing? Because it gives them the ability to see things from a different perspective, or to think about problems and challenges in new and exciting ways. So I no longer pray that God will heal my grandson Corbin, but rather I pray that God will help Corbin understand the calling placed on his life and give him the strength to live into the purpose God has for him. I want to close by talking about one more person, Gary. Gary lives next door to our church in an assisted living facility because he doesn't have the ability to care for himself. Gary has a lower IQ and he has several cognitive challenges since birth. But that doesn't stop him from being a loving, Christ-filled child of God. Gary and his housemates are at church every week, faithfully. And Gary has taught me more about joyful service than anyone else in my life. Gary loves to serve. He is eager to help and do anything in the life of the church. Need bulletins folded? He's hurt if you don't let him help. Need a greeter on Sunday morning? He's there every week, faithfully greeting each person and make sure they get those folded bulletins. He prays each Sunday with such a sincere heart for others. Maybe Gary and Corbin and Temple are perfectly and wonderfully made, and it's me that needs to keep learning and to keep expanding my understanding of what the image of God looks like. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again on extraordinaryconnection.org.